In the harsh desert of Arizona Territory, 1885, where survival meant choosing between mercy and tradition, an Apache war chief named Nailnish faced an impossible decision. His 8-year-old daughter Ayanna lay dying from fever, and the only person who refused to abandon her was the very woman his people considered their enemy, a white widow named Sarah McKenna, whose husband had been killed in Apache raids just months before. When Nailnish discovered Sarah nursing his daughter with herbs and cool water, defying his warriors' demands to leave, he stood at the crossroads between a father's desperate love and a leader's duty. The woman had every reason to let his child die, yet she stayed. His warriors demanded her removal, his elders questioned his judgment, but something in Sarah's determined eyes told him that his daughter's life hung in the balance of this moment. What happens when the heart of a grieving father meets the soul of a woman who chooses compassion over revenge? In a land where blood feuds run deeper than canyon rivers, one act of unexpected kindness would challenge everything both cultures believed about their enemies and change the course of two broken lives forever. The scorching Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on the hidden Apache camp nestled in the Red Rock Canyons. Nailnish rode his painted horse through the narrow entrance, his face grim with worry that had been eating at him for 3 days. His scouting party had returned empty-handed from their search for the white settlers who had been encroaching on Apache hunting grounds, but that failure meant nothing compared to the fear gnawing at his chest. His daughter Ayanna had fallen ill with the burning sickness that had already claimed 2 children in the camp. At 8 years old, she was the light of his world, the only remaining connection to his beloved wife who had died giving birth to their son 2 winters ago. The baby had not survived either, leaving Nailnish with only Ayanna to remind him that life could still hold beauty amid so much death and conflict. As he approached his wickiup, the traditional dome-shaped dwelling made of wooden poles and brush, Nailnish noticed something that made his blood run cold. Voices were coming from inside, his daughter's weak whisper and another voice he did not recognize. A woman's voice, speaking softly in broken Apache words mixed with English. His hand instinctively moved to the knife at his belt. Dismounting silently, Nailnish crept closer to the entrance. Through a gap in the brush covering, he could see movement inside. His heart nearly stopped when he saw her, a white woman with auburn hair pulled back in a simple bun, kneeling beside Ayanna's sleeping mat. The woman was gently placing a cool, wet cloth on his daughter's burning forehead, speaking in soothing tones. "There, little one," the woman whispered in English, then attempted Apache words she had obviously learned recently. "Sleep, rest, you will be strong." Nailnish's first instinct was to burst in and demand an explanation, but something held him back. This woman, he recognized her now from the descriptions his warriors had given him. Sarah McKenna, the widow whose husband had been killed in a raid led by his cousin Geronimo 3 moons ago. She was supposed to be their enemy, yet here she was, caring for his dying child. The irony was not lost on him. Just yesterday, his war council had discussed plans to drive out the remaining white settlers from their traditional lands. This woman's presence in their camp should have meant capture, interrogation, or worse. Yet as he watched her carefully spooning water between Ayanna's cracked lips, Nailnish found himself frozen by confusion and something that felt dangerously close to gratitude. Sarah McKenna had lost her husband to Apache warriors, had every reason to hate them all, yet she was here risking her own life to save his daughter. How had she even found their hidden camp? Why would she endanger herself this way? As if sensing his presence, Sarah looked up sharply toward the entrance. Her green eyes, red-rimmed from exhaustion, met his through the gap in the covering. For a moment, neither moved. Then, slowly, deliberately, she turned back to Ayanna and continued her gentle ministrations. "I know you are there, Nailnish," she said quietly in English, never taking her eyes off the child. "Your daughter asked for water. She has not been able to keep food down for 2 days." The Apache war chief stepped through the entrance, his 6-foot frame filling the doorway. At 32, he had the lean, muscled build of a man who had spent his life fighting for survival in the desert. His long black hair was adorned with 2 eagle feathers, marking his status as a war leader, and his face bore the weathered lines of a man who had seen too much death. Yet now, looking at this white woman caring for his child, he appeared more confused than fierce. "Why are you here?" he asked in careful English. His voice was deep, controlled, but Sarah could hear the underlying tension. "Because she needed help," Sarah replied simply, continuing to bathe Ayanna's face with the cool cloth. and because no child should suffer alone. Nailnish studied her for a long moment. Sarah McKenna was perhaps 25 years old, with the fair skin of someone not born to this harsh desert climate. Her simple brown dress was dusty and torn from what must have been a difficult journey to reach their camp. Dark circles under her eyes spoke of sleepless nights, and her hands shook slightly from exhaustion, yet she continued her careful work. "My warriors will demand your death when they discover you here," Nailnish said, settling cross-legged on the opposite side of Ayana's mat. It was neither a threat nor a warning, simply a statement of fact. "Then, they will have to wait until I am finished," Sarah replied, meeting his gaze directly. "Your daughter has the fever sickness. In my homeland, we call it the burning fever. I have seen it before. Without proper care, it kills quickly. What do you know of healing?" Nailnish asked, though he was already noting that Ayana seemed more peaceful than she had been in days. "My mother was a midwife and healer in Pennsylvania before we came west. She taught me about herbs and caring for the sick." Sarah reached into a leather pouch at her waist and withdrew several dried plants. "These are willow bark for the fever, elderberry for strength, and mint to settle her stomach." Nailnish watched as she prepared a weak tea using water from the pot that had been sitting unused beside Ayana's mat. His own grandmother had been the camp healer until her death last winter, and they had been struggling without her knowledge. The army post doctor was 3 days right away and would never come to treat an Apache child. The Mexican curandero they sometimes traded with had been killed in a cavalry raid 2 months ago. "How did you find our camp?" he asked as Sarah helped Ayana sip the herbal tea. "I followed the signs your people left. I have been tracking you for 5 days." Sarah's honesty was startling. "I heard from the Mexican traders that a child was sick. They said the great war leader Nailnish had a daughter who was dying. And you came here, knowing you might not leave alive?" Sarah paused in her work, finally, looking directly at him again. "My husband is dead because of your people. My life as I knew it is over. But that does not mean I can let a child die when I might be able to help." The simple truth of her words hung in the air between them. Outside, Nailnish could hear the sounds of the camp children playing, women preparing the evening meal, men discussing the day's hunt. Normal sounds of life continuing while his daughter fought for hers. "She is all I have left," Nailnish said quietly, the admission surprising him. He rarely showed vulnerability, even to his closest warriors. "I know," Sarah replied softly. "I saw how you looked at her when you thought no one was watching. The same way my husband looked at the children we never had." For the next hour, they worked together in silence. Sarah showed Nailnish how to prepare the herbal remedies, how to position Ayana to help her breathing, how to recognize the signs that the fever was breaking or getting worse. The Apache war chief found himself studying this white woman who had risked everything to help his child. Sarah's movements were gentle but confident as she cared for Ayana. She hummed softly while she worked, an old lullaby that seemed to calm the restless child. When Ayana woke briefly and whimpered in pain, Sarah spoke to her in a mixture of English and the Apache words she had learned, her voice full of the tenderness of a mother despite having no children of her own. As the sun began to set outside, casting long shadows through the wickiup, footsteps approached. Nailnish tensed, recognizing the heavy tread of his war lieutenant, Cochise's son Taze. The young warrior's voice called out in Apache, asking for permission to enter. "What do you want?" Nailnish replied in their native tongue. "The scouts have returned. They report strange tracks leading to our camp. White woman's shoes." Taze's voice was suspicious. "Some of the warriors want to search every dwelling." Nailnish looked at Sarah, who was still gently stroking Ayana's hair. The child seemed to be resting more peacefully than she had in days. For the first time since Ayana had fallen ill, Nailnish felt a small spark of hope. "I will speak with the warriors," he said to Taze. "Tell them to gather at the council fire." "What of the search?" Nailnish was quiet for a long moment, looking between his daughter and the woman who had risked her life to help her. "Tell them their war chief will handle any threats to the camp personally." When Taze's footsteps retreated, Sarah looked up at Nailnish with understanding in her eyes. "You must decide whether to protect me or turn me over to them." "Yes," Nailnish admitted. My warriors have lost friends and family to white soldiers and settlers. They will not understand why you are here. And what will you tell them? Nailnish was quiet for a moment, watching his daughter's face. Ayana's breathing seemed easier, her skin less flushed with fever. I do not yet know, he said honestly. Sarah nodded, continuing her gentle care. Then, I will stay with her until you decide. If she dies while I am gone, you will always wonder if I could have saved her. The truth of that statement hit Nailnish like a physical blow. He would indeed wonder for the rest of his life. But, keeping Sarah here meant defying his own warriors, challenging the traditions that held his people together during these times of war and hardship. As if reading his thoughts, Sarah spoke again. Your daughter called me mother in her fever dreams yesterday. Did you know that? Nailnish felt his chest tighten. Ayana had been barely 2 when her mother died. She had no real memories of maternal care. She does not remember her mother, he said quietly. But, she remembers the feeling of being mothered. That is what she needs now, not just medicine, but someone who will stay with her through the worst of it. Outside, Nailnish could hear his warriors gathering around the council fire. Their voices were agitated, discussing the possibility of white spies or soldiers in their camp. Soon, they would demand answers from their war chief. If you stay, Nailnish said slowly, you may not live to see tomorrow's sunrise. Sarah looked down at Ayana, then back at him. If I leave, she may not either. The choice before Nailnish was impossible. Save his daughter by protecting her healer, or maintain his authority by turning the white woman over to warriors who had every right to demand justice for their own losses. Outside, the voices around the council fire grew more insistent. Inside the wickiup, his daughter slept peacefully for the first time in days, watched over by the woman whose husband had died at Apache hands. Nailnish rose to his feet, his decision crystallizing like morning frost on desert stone. Stay with her, he said quietly. I will face the warriors. As he moved toward the entrance, Sarah's voice stopped him. Nailnish, she said, using his name for the first time. Thank you. He turned back to look at her, this white woman who had chosen mercy over revenge, who had risked everything for a child who was not her own. Do not thank me yet, he replied. The night is far from over. With that, Nailnish stepped out into the gathering darkness to face his warriors and defend a choice that would change everything he thought he knew about honor, duty, and the true meaning of strength. Behind him, Sarah McKenna continued her vigil over the daughter of her enemy, her gentle humming mixing with the distant sound of raised voices around the council fire. The most difficult battle of Nailnish's life was about to begin, and it would not be fought with weapons or war cries, but with words that could either bridge 2 broken worlds or destroy them both. The council fire cast dancing shadows across the faces of 23 Apache warriors as Nailnish approached the circle. The men sat in traditional formation, with the eldest and most respected fighters positioned closest to the flames. Their expressions ranged from curious to openly hostile, and Nailnish could feel the tension crackling in the desert air like lightning before a storm. Taze rose first, his young face flushed with anger and confusion. At 24, he was one of the most hot-headed warriors in the band, still burning with the need to prove himself worthy of his famous father's legacy. War Chief, he said formally, we have found the tracks of a white woman leading directly to our camp. The warriors demand to know what action you will take. Nailnish took his place in the circle, noting how the flames illuminated the weathered faces around him. These men had followed him through countless raids and battles. They had trusted him with their lives and the safety of their families. Now he was about to ask them to trust him with something that went against everything they understood about warfare and survival. I know of these tracks, Nailnish said simply, his voice carrying clearly in the still desert air. The white woman who made them sits now in my dwelling, caring for my daughter. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Warriors leaped to their feet, hands moving instinctively to their weapons. Angry voices erupted in rapid Apache, demanding explanations, calling for immediate action. Nailnish remained seated, letting the storm of outrage wash over him before raising his hand for silence. Sit, he commanded, and the authority in his voice was enough to bring most of the warriors back to their places. You will hear all before you judge. Old Nana, the eldest warrior present and a man whose opinion carried enormous weight, spoke next. His voice was gravelly from years of war cries and desert wind.
Nelnish, my friend, what madness is this? A white woman in our camp? Have you forgotten what they have done to us? What they continue to do?
I have forgotten nothing, Nelnish replied evenly. I remember my brother Mangus, killed by white soldiers who promised safe passage. I remember my cousin Victorio, hunted like an animal until he died far from his homeland. I remember every Apache child who has fallen to white man's diseases and bullets. Then, explain why one of them breathes the air of our camp while we speak, said Chihuahua, a scarred veteran of a dozen battles. Why she has not been brought before us for judgment. Nelnish stood slowly, his imposing frame outlined by the firelight. Around the circle, 23 pairs of eyes watched him with a mixture of respect, confusion, and growing anger. These were not men accustomed to patience when it came to enemies in their midst. 5 days ago, my daughter Ayana fell ill with the burning sickness, Nelnish began.
You all know this.
You have seen how the fever consumed her, how she grew weaker each day.
Our medicine woman is dead.
The Mexican healer who sometimes helped us is dead. I watched my child dying, and I could do nothing.
Several warriors nodded grimly.
They had all lost children to disease and violence. In their harsh world, such losses were understood to be part of life's cruel rhythm. This white woman, Nelnish continued, came to our camp not as a spy or enemy, but as a healer.
She knew my daughter was sick. She came to help. Lies, spat Taze, jumping to his feet again.
White women do not help Apache children.
They celebrate when we die. This one seeks to poison Ayana or gather information about our camp. The woman's name is Sarah McKenna, Nelnish said calmly.
Her husband was killed in the raid Geronimo led against the settlement 3 moons ago.
The information hit the circle like a physical blow.
Several warriors sucked in sharp breaths. They remembered that raid, it had been successful, with several white men killed and horses captured. Now one of the widows was here, in their camp. All the more reason to kill her, growled Ju, a massive warrior with ritual scars covering his chest.
She comes for revenge. Perhaps she brings soldiers behind her. No soldiers follow her, Nelnish said. My scouts would have seen them.
She came alone, on foot, following our trail for 5 days across the desert. When I found her, she was giving water to my daughter and speaking words of comfort. It is a trick, Taze insisted. White people are skilled at deception. She gains your trust, learns our weaknesses, then leads the cavalry to us. Nelnish had expected this argument. It was logical, reasonable, and exactly what he would have thought himself just hours earlier. But he had seen Sarah McKenna's face as she cared for Ayana. He had heard the gentleness in her voice, watched the careful way she prepared the healing herbs. If it is a trick, Nelnish said, it is one that may save my daughter's life. For the first time in 3 days, Ayana rests peacefully.
The white woman's medicine has brought down her fever.
Old Nana leaned forward, his weathered features thoughtful. You speak of her healing skills.
What does she know that we do not?
Her mother was a healer among her people. She knows the use of herbs we do not have, ways of treating sickness that our grandmother never taught us. Nelnish paused, letting his words sink in.
Ayana was dying. Now she breathes easier. Would you have me turn away the one person who can save her?
Yes, Taze said immediately. Better that Ayana die with honor than live because an enemy showed mercy. The spirits will not bless a child saved by the hands of those who kill our people.
The young warrior's words stung because they echoed the traditional Apache beliefs about spiritual contamination from enemy contact.
But Nelnish had spent the evening watching Sarah McKenna work, and he had seen something that challenged everything he thought he knew about their enemies.
Tell me, Taze, Nelnish said quietly, when did you last see an act of mercy from a white person toward an Apache?
Never, Taze replied without hesitation. Because they are incapable of mercy toward us.
Then, how do you explain what I have seen tonight? Nelnish asked. A white woman whose husband we killed, risking her life to save an Apache child? If they are all evil, if they are all our enemies without exception, how do you explain Sarah McKenna?
The question hung in the air like smoke. Several warriors shifted uncomfortably, and used to having their fundamental beliefs about their enemies challenged so directly. Chihuahua spoke up, his voice careful and measured.
Perhaps she is different. But, even if this one woman shows mercy, what of the soldiers who hunt us? What of the settlers who take our land? Will kindness to one enemy woman stop the cavalry from attacking our families?
No, Nailnish admitted.
It will not.
But, maybe it will show us something about ourselves that we have forgotten in all these years of war.
What do you mean? Asked Nana. Nailnish looked around the circle, meeting each warrior's eyes in turn.
We pride ourselves on our honor, our courage, our protection of the weak. Yet when a woman comes to help a dying child, we speak of killing her.
What honor is there in that?
What courage does it take to murder someone who tends the sick?
She is our enemy, Taze protested.
She was our enemy, Nailnish corrected. Tonight, she is the woman saving my daughter's life.
Tomorrow, she may be something else entirely.
But, in this moment, she deserves the protection I would give to any guest in our camp. The concept of guest protection was sacred among the Apache. Even enemies, if they entered a camp under specific circumstances, could claim temporary sanctuary. But those circumstances had never included a white woman arriving uninvited to tend a sick child. Ju stood up, his massive frame intimidating even in the circle of seasoned warriors.
You ask us to set aside generations of hatred because one white woman acts strangely.
You ask us to risk our family's safety for someone whose people would not hesitate to kill our children. I ask you to trust me, Nailnish said simply. As you have trusted me in battle, as you have trusted me to lead you safely through the desert, as you have trusted me to make decisions that kept our families alive.
I ask for that trust now. Old Nana studied Nailnish's face for a long moment before speaking. You are asking us to protect this woman. For how long? And, what happens when word spreads that the Apache show mercy to whites? Will others come, expecting the same treatment?
I do not know, Nailnish said honestly. I know only that my daughter was dying, and this woman came to help her. I know that she asked for nothing in return, expected no protection, made no demands. She simply saw a sick child and acted with kindness.
Kindness is a luxury we cannot afford, Chihuahua said grimly. It will be seen as weakness by our enemies. Will it? Nailnish asked. Or will it be seen as the strength to choose mercy when we could choose revenge? Which takes more courage, killing an unarmed woman or protecting her when our every instinct says to strike? Taze's frustration boiled over.
You speak like a white missionary, not an Apache war chief.
Have you forgotten that this woman's people killed your wife? Have you forgotten that they hunt us like animals? The accusation about his wife's death was a low blow, and several warriors gasped at Taze's audacity.
Nailnish's wife had died in childbirth, not from white violence, but the young warrior was clearly trying to provoke an emotional response.
Instead, Nailnish's voice became even calmer. My wife died bringing life into the world. She would not want me to take life unnecessarily from it. And if you question my loyalty to our people again, Taze, we will settle that matter with weapons rather than words. The threat was delivered quietly, but every warrior in the circle knew that Nailnish's skill with knife and gun was legendary. Taze's face flushed, but he remained silent. I propose this, Nailnish continued, addressing the entire circle.
The white woman stays until my daughter recovers or dies. If Ayana lives, we escort Sarah McKenna safely from our territory and let her return to her own people. If Ayana dies despite her care, then we will discuss what justice requires.
And if soldiers come looking for her, asked Chihuahua. Then, we fight them as we always have. But, we will not kill an innocent woman because of what others might do.
Old Nana spoke slowly, his words carrying the weight of years and wisdom. In the old days, before the whites came in great numbers, we sometimes took captives who became part of our tribe. We judged people by their actions, not their birth. Perhaps there is wisdom in returning to such ways.
You would make her Apache? Taze asked incredulously.
I would judge her as she has judged us, Nana replied. She showed mercy to our child.
Should we show less?
The debate continued for another hour, with warriors arguing passionately on both sides. Some spoke of the practical dangers of harboring a white woman, others of the spiritual implications of accepting help from an enemy. A few, inspired by Nana's words, began to speak of honor and the true meaning of Apache strength. Throughout it all, Nailnish remained calm and steady, answering objections and explaining his reasoning. He spoke of watching Sarah McKenna work, of seeing genuine care in her actions, of the improvement in Ayana's condition since the white woman's arrival. Finally, as the fire burned low and the night grew cold, Nana called for a decision. Those who support our war chief's protection of the white woman, show yourselves. Slowly, hands began to rise around the circle.
Nana's went up first, followed by Chihuahua and several of the older warriors.
After a moment's hesitation, about half the remaining men raised their hands as well. Nailnish counted carefully. 13 votes in favor, 10 against. Not an overwhelming mandate, but enough to justify his decision.
It is settled, he announced.
Sarah McKenna will remain under my protection while she cares for my daughter.
Any warrior who harms her will answer to me personally. Taze rose abruptly, his face dark with anger.
You make a mistake that will cost us all, War Chief.
When the soldiers come, remember that some of us warned you.
With that, the young warrior stalked away into the darkness, followed by 2 of his supporters.
The remaining warriors began to disperse, some nodding respectfully to Nailnish, others walking away in thoughtful silence.
Old Nana approached as the last of the men departed. You have chosen a difficult path, my friend, he said quietly. I hope your faith in this woman proves justified.
So do I, Nailnish replied.
But I could not watch my daughter die when help was offered, no matter who offered it. The young ones will watch you closely now, Nana warned.
Taze is not wrong about the dangers.
If this woman brings trouble to our camp, your leadership will be questioned.
Nailnish nodded gravely.
Apache leadership was not absolute. War chiefs could be challenged and replaced if their decisions proved disastrous. By protecting Sarah McKenna, he was risking not just his own life but his ability to protect his people.
I understand the risks, he said.
But I also understand that sometimes a leader must choose between what is safe and what is right. As Nana walked away, Nailnish stood alone beside the dying fire. In the distance, he could hear the normal sounds of the camp settling for the night, mothers singing lullabies, men checking their weapons, the soft conversations of families preparing for sleep. But, in his wiki-up, he knew that Sarah McKenna still kept her vigil over Ayana. The white woman had risked everything to help his child, and now he had risked everything to protect her. Whether that choice would save them all or destroy them remained to be seen. Taking a deep breath of the cool desert air, Nailnish walked back toward his dwelling, wondering what the morning would bring and whether his daughter would live to see it. Behind him, the council fire finally died to glowing embers, leaving only darkness and the distant howl of a coyote to mark the end of a night that had changed everything. Dawn broke over the Apache camp with the soft purple light that painted the desert mountains each morning. Nailnish had not slept, choosing instead to sit outside his wiki-up through the long night, listening to the gentle murmur of Sarah's voice as she talked to Ayana during the child's restless moments. Now, as the first rays of sunlight crept across the camp, he could hear something that made his heart leap, his daughter's voice, weak but clear, asking for water. Inside the dwelling, Sarah looked up as Nailnish entered, and he was startled by the transformation in both females. Ayana sat propped up against rolled blankets, her dark eyes bright and focused for the first time in days. The dangerous flush of fever had faded from her cheeks, replaced by the pale but healthy color of recovery. Sarah, though clearly exhausted, wore an expression of quiet satisfaction. Papa, Ayana whispered, reaching out her small hand.
I am thirsty.
Nailnish knelt beside his daughter, taking her hand gently in his much larger one. Her skin was cool to the touch, the burning heat of fever gone. How do you feel, little star? He asked, using his pet name for her. Tired, Ayana admitted, but the fire inside me is gone.
The white mother gave me good medicine.
Nailnish's eyes met Sarah's over his daughter's head. The white woman had dark circles under her eyes and her auburn hair had escaped its careful bun, but she smiled with the weary triumph of someone who had fought death and won. The fever broke just before sunrise, Sarah explained quietly. She was able to keep down some broth, and her breathing is much easier now.
Will she recover fully?
Nailnish asked, though he hardly dared hope for such good news.
Yes, Sarah said with confidence.
She will need rest and careful feeding for a few days, but the worst is over.
She is a strong little girl.
Ayana looked between her father and Sarah with the curious intelligence of a child who sensed important adult conversations happening around her.
Papa, why does Taze look angry when he sees the white mother?
Nailnish was surprised his daughter had noticed the young warrior's hostility, but children often saw more than adults gave them credit for. Before he could answer, Sarah spoke up. Some people find it hard to understand why I want to help you get better, she said gently to Ayana.
They think I should not care about Apache children.
But why?
Ayana asked with the directness of childhood.
You are kind.
Kind people help sick children.
Sarah's eyes filled with tears, and Nailnish found himself touched by his daughter's simple wisdom.
In Ayana's world, kindness was kindness, regardless of who offered it. Your daughter is very wise, Sarah said to Nailnish. Children often understand truth better than adults do. Outside, the camp was beginning to stir.
Nailnish could hear women starting their morning fires, the laughter of children beginning their day's play, the low voices of men discussing the day's plans. Soon, word of Ayana's improvement would spread, and with it would come increased scrutiny of the white woman who had brought about the healing. Sarah, Nailnish said carefully, you should know that not everyone in the camp supports your presence here.
Last night's council was difficult.
I expected as much, she replied, beginning to gather her healing supplies.
Your people have every reason to distrust mine. I am grateful that you spoke for me. Where will you go when Ayana is fully recovered? He asked.
The question had been troubling him throughout the night. Sarah was quiet for a moment, her hands stilling in their work.
I do not know, she admitted. My husband's farm was sold to pay his debts. I have no family left in the East. Perhaps I will find work in Tucson or one of the other towns.
The thought of Sarah trying to make her way alone in the rough frontier towns troubled Nailnish more than he cared to admit. A woman without protection or resources would face constant danger, especially one known to have helped Apache. Before he could respond, voices approached outside the wickiup. Nailnish recognized his sister Desba's voice, speaking excitedly with another woman about something happening near the horse corral.
A moment later, Desba's face appeared at the entrance. Brother, she said in Apache, may I enter? I bring news about your daughter.
Nailnish gestured for her to come in. Desba was 2 years younger than him, a widow herself whose husband had been killed by Mexican soldiers 5 years earlier. She had helped care for Ayana when the child was younger and had been deeply worried about the fever sickness. When Desba saw Ayana sitting up and alert, her face lit with joy. She rushed forward, speaking rapidly in Apache, praising the spirits for the child's recovery. Then, she noticed Sarah and stopped abruptly.
This is the white woman, she asked in Apache, studying Sarah with obvious curiosity.
Yes,
Nailnish replied. Sarah McKenna.
She is the healer who saved Ayana. Desba looked between Sarah and Ayana, taking in the scene. The child was obviously much better, and the white woman looked like someone who had spent the night fighting to save a life.
Ayana, Desba said in careful English, you feel better?
Yes, Aunt Desba, Ayana replied in Apache, then switched to English for Sarah's benefit. The white mother made the fire sickness go away. Desba studied Sarah for a long moment, then spoke to her brother in rapid Apache.
The women of the camp are talking. Some are frightened, others curious.
They want to know if this white woman knows other healing ways.
What do you think? Nailnish asked his sister.
I think, Desba said slowly, that anyone who can bring a child back from the edge of death deserves respect, regardless of the color of her skin. Sarah, who had been following the conversation as best she could with her limited Apache, spoke up. I do not wish to cause trouble for your family or your people.
When Ayana is strong enough, I will leave.
Desba looked at Nailnish, her eyebrows raised in question. He translated Sarah's words, and his sister replied thoughtfully.
She says she does not want to cause trouble, Nailnish told Sarah. My sister asks if you would be willing to teach some of our women your healing methods before you go. Sarah looked surprised by the request. They would want to learn from me?
Desba lost her own daughter to fever 2 winters ago, Nailnish explained.
Many of our women have lost children to sickness.
If you have knowledge that could prevent such losses, they would be eager to learn.
The implications of what he was suggesting began to dawn on Sarah.
Teaching Apache women her healing methods would require staying longer, becoming more involved with the tribe, taking greater risks with both her own safety and the fragile peace that surrounded her presence. I would be honored to share what I know, she said finally.
But, is it safe? For them, I mean. If your people are seen learning white medicine, will there be trouble?
Nailnish translated the question for Desba, who laughed softly. Tell her, Desba said, that Apache women learn useful things wherever they find them. We do not care who first discovered how to heal our children. Over the next few hours, word of Ayana's recovery spread through the camp like wildfire. Women began to find excuses to pass by Nailnish's wickiup, hoping for glimpses of the white healer who had saved the war chief's daughter. Children peeked curiously through the brush walls, whispering excitedly about the strange white mother who talked in 2 languages. By midday, Desba had organized an informal gathering of the camp's women. They arrived with their own sick children, their questions about healing, and their careful curiosity about this white woman who had risked everything to help one of them. Sarah found herself surrounded by Apache mothers, grandmothers, and young women, all eager to learn. Language barriers melted away as they shared the universal concerns of mothers caring for their children. Sarah showed them how to prepare her herbal remedies, explained the signs of different illnesses, demonstrated the gentle techniques her own mother had taught her for comforting sick babies. The Apache women, in turn, shared their own knowledge. They showed Sarah desert plants she had never seen before, explained their traditional methods of treating injuries and fevers, taught her Apache words for different parts of the body and types of sickness. What had begun as a simple request for healing knowledge became an exchange that benefited everyone. Nailnish watched from a distance, amazed by what he was seeing. Apache women and a white woman, natural enemies according to everything he had been taught, working together as if they were sisters. Their children played nearby, switching between Apache and English as they chattered about their games. Not everyone approved. Taze and his supporters kept their distance, scowling at the gathering and muttering about the contamination of traditional ways. But their disapproval was drowned out by the excitement of the women and the obvious enthusiasm of the children. Late in the afternoon, old Nana approached Nailnish as he sat watching the informal medical lesson taking place near his wickiup. Your white woman has created quite a stir, the elderly warrior observed. She is not my woman, Nailnish replied, though he realized as soon as he said it that the statement felt somehow false. Nana's knowing smile suggested he had caught the slight hesitation. Of course not. But, you watch her like a man who has found something precious in the desert. Nailnish said nothing, but he could not deny that he had found himself studying Sarah's face as she worked with the Apache women. There was a light in her eyes that had not been there when she first arrived, a sense of purpose and belonging that transformed her entire bearing. What will you do when she leaves? Nana asked gently. I will wish her well and hope she finds safety among her own people, Nailnish replied, though the words tasted bitter in his mouth. And what if she does not want to go? The question hit Nailnish like a physical blow. He had not allowed himself to consider that possibility, but now that Nana had voiced it, he realized it had been lurking in his mind all day. She has no place here, he said finally. She is white, I am Apache. We are from different worlds. Are we? Nana asked. Look at her now. See how naturally she fits with our women, how easily the children accept her. Perhaps the worlds are not so different as we have believed. Before Nailnish could respond, Ayana's voice called out from inside the wickiup. Both men hurried inside to find the little girl sitting up completely, asking for real food instead of the thin broths she had been managing. Sarah was beaming as she checked Ayana's pulse and listened to her breathing. She is definitely on the mend, she announced. Tomorrow she should be able to get up and walk around a little.
Sarah, Ayana said in her clear child's voice, will you stay until I am completely well? Sarah looked at Nailnish, uncertainty in her green eyes. That depends on many things, little one.
But, I want you to stay, Ayana insisted with the absolute confidence of a child who had never been denied anything important.
You could be my mother now.
I do not remember my first mother, but I remember you taking care of me. The innocent words hung in the air like smoke from the sacred fire. Nailnish felt his chest tighten as he saw the effect of his daughter's request on Sarah's face. Tears gathered in the white woman's eyes, and she looked at him with an expression he could not quite read.
Ayana, Nailnish said gently, Sarah has her own life to live. She cannot stay here forever.
Why not? His daughter asked with the logic of childhood.
She likes us. We like her.
The other mothers like learning from her.
Why cannot she be Apache like us?
The question was so simple, so innocent, and yet it cut to the heart of everything that made such a thing impossible. Sarah was white in a world where whites and Apache were mortal enemies. She was a woman alone in a society that offered women little protection outside of marriage or family ties. She was an outsider who had somehow found acceptance among people who had every reason to reject her. Some things are not so easy, little star, Nailnish said finally. But, as he looked at Sarah's face, seeing the longing there mixed with hope and fear, he began to wonder if maybe his daughter's innocent wisdom saw something that the adults had missed. Maybe some things that seemed impossible were only difficult. Maybe some bridges could be built across the deepest chasms if both sides were willing to take the risk. Outside, the sun was setting over the desert, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions, new tests of the fragile peace that had grown up around Sarah's presence in their camp. But tonight, for the first time since his wife's death, Nailnish felt something he had not expected to feel again, hope for a future that included more than just survival. Sarah McKenna had come to their camp as a stranger, stayed as a healer, and somehow become something none of them had anticipated. What she might become in the days ahead was a question that would test everything they thought they knew about love, loyalty, and the true meaning of home. 3 weeks had passed since Sarah McKenna first entered the Apache camp, and the rhythm of daily life had begun to include her as naturally as the sunrise. Ayana had made a complete recovery, her laughter once again ringing through the camp as she played with the other children. But, instead of preparing to leave, Sarah had found herself drawn deeper into the life of the tribe. Each morning brought new mothers seeking her healing knowledge. Each afternoon found her working alongside Apache women, learning their traditional crafts while teaching them her medical skills. Each evening, she sat by the fire listening to stories told in 2 languages, watching Ayana flourish under the attention of both her father and the woman the child had openly begun calling White Mother. But, the peace that had settled over the camp was fragile, and everyone knew it could not last forever. On this particular morning, as Sarah helped Desba prepare poultices for a child with an infected cut, a scout came riding hard into camp with news that made every warrior reach for his weapons. Soldiers had been seen 2 days' ride to the east, asking questions about a missing white woman at every trading post and settlement. Nailnish stood in the center of the camp as the scout delivered his report, his face grim with the implications. Around him, warriors gathered with the quiet efficiency of men accustomed to sudden danger. How many soldiers? He asked the scout.
20 cavalry, led by a captain with yellow hair.
They carry a photograph of a woman and ask if anyone has seen her.
They offer silver for information. Nailnish felt his stomach tighten.
20 soldiers were not enough to attack the camp, but they were enough to track down one white woman if they found her trail. Do they know our location? He asked.
Not yet, the scout replied. But they move in our direction.
If they find the right guide, they could reach the outer canyons within 2 suns.
The warriors looked to their war chief expectantly.
The course of action seemed clear: move the camp immediately, taking Sarah far enough away that the soldiers would never find her. But Nailnish knew that such a move would only delay the inevitable. The army would not stop searching for a white woman, especially one believed to be held captive by Apache. Sarah had been listening from the edge of the crowd, understanding enough Apache by now to follow the basic situation. As the warriors began discussing defensive positions and escape routes, she stepped forward.
Nailnish, she said quietly, we need to talk. He nodded, following her away from the gathered men to a spot where they could speak privately. Ayana, who seemed to sense the tension among the adults, followed them with wide, worried eyes. They are looking for me, Sarah said without preamble. It was not a question. Yes, Nailnish admitted. The army believes you are being held captive. They will not stop searching until they find you. Sarah looked around the camp that had become more of a home to her in 3 weeks than anywhere she had lived since leaving Pennsylvania. Apache women went about their daily tasks, but she could see the tension in their movements, the way they kept glancing toward the men discussing strategy. If I stay, I bring danger to all of you, she said. If I run, they will follow. There is only one choice that protects everyone. Nailnish did not want to hear what he knew she was going to say, but he remained silent, letting her voice the truth they both understood. I have to go to them, Sarah continued. I have to tell the army that I am safe, that I came here of my own free will, and that I wish to remain with your people. They will not believe you, Nailnish said immediately. They will think you have been forced to say such things. They will take you away regardless of what you want. Then, I will have to convince them otherwise. Ayana, who had been listening with the intense concentration children brought to adult conversations they sensed were important, suddenly spoke up. White Mother, you cannot leave us. I need you here. Sarah knelt down to Ayana's level, taking the child's hands in hers. Little one, I do not want to leave. But, sometimes we must do difficult things to protect the people we love. But, you are one of us now, Ayana protested. Aunt Desba said so. She said you have an Apache heart even if you have white skin. The child's words cut deeper than any weapon. Sarah felt tears gathering in her eyes as she looked at this little girl who had become like a daughter to her. I know, sweetheart. And, you will always be like a daughter to me, no matter what happens. Nailnish watched the exchange with a growing sense of desperation. Over the past 3 weeks, he had come to realize that his feelings for Sarah McKenna went far beyond gratitude for saving his daughter's life. He had fallen in love with this brave, compassionate woman who had risked everything for a child she did not know. But, more than that, Sarah had brought something to his family that had been missing since his wife's death. She had given Ayana the mother the child had never really known, had filled their wiki up with warmth and laughter, had made them feel like a complete family again. There must be another way, he said, though even as he spoke, he could not think of one. Sarah stood, her decision made. I will go to meet the soldiers tomorrow. I will tell them that I chose to stay with your people, that I was never a captive, that I wish to remain here if they will allow it. And, when they refuse? Nailnish asked. Then, at least you and Ayana will be safe. They will have no reason to continue searching once they have found me. No, Ayana said suddenly, her young voice firm with determination. I will not let them take you away. Papa, tell the soldiers that White Mother belongs to us now. Nailnish looked down at his daughter, seeing in her face the same fierce loyalty that had always marked their people. At 8 years old, Ayana was already showing the courage and determination that would serve her well in their harsh world. Little star, he said gently, it is not that simple. The soldiers have their own laws, their own ways of thinking about such things. Then, we will fight them, Ayana declared with the absolute confidence of childhood. You are a great warrior. Our men are brave. We can make them leave White Mother alone. Sarah felt her heart break at the child's innocent faith. Sweetheart, fighting would only bring more soldiers, more danger for everyone in the camp. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is walk away from a fight. That evening, word of Sarah's decision spread through the camp. The reaction was immediate and emotional. The women who had been learning her healing methods begged her to reconsider. The children who had grown fond of the white woman who played games and told stories in 2 languages clung to her skirts. Even some of the warriors who had initially opposed her presence now spoke of the loss her departure would represent. But, it was Desba's reaction that surprised everyone the most. Nailnish's sister, who had always been practical and level-headed, became almost fierce in her opposition to Sarah leaving. This is foolishness, she declared in front of the gathered women.
Sarah has proven herself to be Apache in all but birth.
She heals our children, learns our ways, respects our traditions. Why should she be forced to return to people who will never understand what she has become?
Because the law of the white man says she must, Sarah replied sadly.
And, because I will not see your people hurt for my sake.
The law of the Apache says differently, Desba countered. Among our people, anyone who proves themselves worthy can be adopted into the tribe.
Sarah has more than proven herself.
The conversation that followed was unlike anything the camp had ever experienced. For the first time in memory, Apache women openly discussed the possibility of formally adopting a white woman into their tribe. They spoke of Sarah's courage in coming to help Ayana, her skill as a healer, her willingness to learn their customs and language. But everyone knew that such acceptance, no matter how genuine, would mean nothing to the U.S. Army. To the soldiers, Sarah would always be a white woman who needed to be rescued from savage captors. As the night grew late and the women reluctantly returned to their families, Nailnish found himself alone with Sarah and Ayana beside the dying fire. His daughter had fallen asleep against Sarah's shoulder, exhausted by the emotional strain of the day.
She loves you, Nailnish said quietly, watching Sarah gently stroke Ayana's dark hair. I love her too, Sarah replied. More than I ever thought possible. These past weeks have been the happiest of my life.
Then, stay, Nailnish said, the words coming from deep in his heart.
Do not go to the soldiers.
Let us move the camp, find a place where they will never find us.
Sarah looked at him with eyes full of pain and longing. You know that is not possible.
They would never stop searching. Eventually they would find us, and, when they did, the consequences would be terrible for everyone. I would rather face those consequences than lose you, Nailnish said, speaking the truth he had been avoiding for days.
Sarah's breath caught. Nailnish.
I love you, he said simply.
Not just as Ayana's healer, not just as a guest in our camp, but as a woman.
I love your courage, your kindness, your strength. I love the way you make my daughter laugh, the way you fit into our life as if you had always been part of it.
Tears were streaming down Sarah's face now. I love you too, she whispered. I love you and Ayana more than I have ever loved anything.
But that is exactly why I have to do this.
I cannot let my presence destroy the people I love most.
They sat in silence for a long time, holding each other across the sleeping child who had brought them together. Both knew that morning would likely bring separation, that the life they had begun to build together was as fragile as desert flowers after rain. But neither was prepared for what actually happened when dawn broke over the camp. The scout who had brought news of the approaching soldiers came riding back into camp at first light, his horse lathered with sweat from hard travel. Behind him rode another figure, a man in dusty civilian clothes with the weathered look of someone who spent his life in the desert. Nailnish rose quickly as the two riders approached, his hand moving instinctively to his weapon. But the scout held up his hand in a gesture of peace. This man says he has a message for the white woman, the scout announced. He is not a soldier, but claims to represent the army captain who searches for her. The civilian dismounted stiffly, removing his hat to reveal graying hair and tired eyes. Ma'am, he said, addressing Sarah directly, my name is Thomas Mitchell. I'm a civilian scout working with Captain Reynolds. I've been sent to speak with you about your situation. Sarah stepped forward, her chin raised with quiet dignity.
I am Sarah McKenna. What does Captain Reynolds wish to know?
Well, ma'am, Mitchell said carefully, the captain has received some unusual reports about your time with these Apache.
Reports that suggest you might be here by choice rather than as a captive.
Sarah felt her heart leap with sudden hope.
That is correct.
I came here to help a sick child.
I have remained because I wish to remain.
Mitchell studied her face carefully.
Ma'am, I have to ask this directly. Have you been coerced or threatened in any way? Are you free to speak the truth?
I am completely free, Sarah said firmly. These people have treated me with more kindness and respect than I ever received in the white settlements. I wish to stay with them, if such a thing is possible. The scout looked around the camp, taking in the scene of Apache daily life, noting the relaxed way the warriors stood, the curious but unafraid expressions of the women and children.
This was not a camp holding a terrified captive.
Captain Reynolds thought you might say that, Mitchell continued. He's prepared to offer a compromise, if you're willing to consider it.
What kind of compromise? Nailnish asked, stepping protectively closer to Sarah.
Mitchell addressed his answer to both of them. The territorial governor is trying to negotiate a new treaty with the Apache bands. He needs someone who can speak both languages, someone trusted by both sides. Someone like Mrs. McKenna here could serve as an official interpreter and liaison. Sarah felt her heart hammering.
What would that mean, exactly?
It would mean legal recognition of your choice to live among the Apache, Mitchell explained. You would have official status as a government interpreter, with protection under territorial law. The army would have no reason to remove you from the tribe. The possibility was so unexpected, so wonderful, that Sarah hardly dared believe it. To stay with Nailnish and Ayanna legally, to continue the work she had begun with the Apache women, to bridge the gap between two cultures that had known only war, it seemed like a dream. But Nailnish was more skeptical.
What would the white government want in return for this recognition? Mitchell's expression became serious. Peace. No more raids on settlements.
Cooperation with the treaty negotiations.
A commitment to coexistence rather than war.
The war chief considered this carefully. His people were tired of running, tired of fighting, tired of watching their children grow up knowing only conflict. If there was a chance for genuine peace, a chance for Sarah to remain with them legally, perhaps it was worth exploring.
I must speak with my warriors, Nailnish said finally. This is not a decision I can make alone.
Of course, Mitchell agreed.
I'll wait for your answer.
But Captain Reynolds needs a response within 2 days. As the morning sun climbed higher over the desert, Sarah found herself facing a choice she had never imagined possible. Instead of choosing between love and duty, between her heart and her safety, she might be able to have both. But the decision would ultimately rest not with her alone, but with the Apache warriors who would have to decide whether to trust the promises of the white government one more time. Everything she had come to love, Nailnish, Ayanna, her new life among the tribe, hung in the balance of that choice. The next 2 days would determine not just her future, but the future of everyone she had learned to call family. The council fire burned bright against the star-filled desert sky as Apache warriors gathered for the most important decision their tribe had faced in years. Unlike the heated debate 3 weeks earlier about Sarah's presence in camp, this discussion carried the weight of their people's entire future. The choice before them was not simply about one white woman, but about whether to trust the promises of peace from a government that had broken treaties before. Nailnish sat in his traditional place as the warriors formed their circle. Thomas Mitchell, the civilian scout, had been invited to join them, an unprecedented honor that demonstrated the gravity of the moment. Sarah waited in Nailnish's wickiup with Ayanna and Desba, knowing that whatever the warriors decided would reshape all their lives. Old Nana spoke first, his weathered voice carrying the wisdom of decades. I have seen many promises from the white government, he began. Most were broken before the ink dried on the paper. Why should we believe this one will be different? Mitchell cleared his throat respectfully. With your permission, I can tell you why this offer is different. The territorial governor, unlike the army, understands that peace cannot be forced. It must be chosen by both sides. He believes that Mrs. McKenna represents something new, a bridge between our peoples that has never existed before. Taze, the young warrior who had opposed Sarah from the beginning, leaned forward aggressively. You speak of bridges, white man, but your people have spent years trying to destroy us. Why would they suddenly want peace with Apache? Because war costs too much, Mitchell replied honestly. In money, in lives, in the future of this territory. The governor sees what Mrs. McKenna has accomplished here in just 3 weeks. She has proven that cooperation is possible. Chihuahua, the scarred veteran, spoke thoughtfully. This woman Sarah has brought healing to our children, knowledge to our wives. But, can one white woman truly change the hatred between our peoples? No, Mitchell admitted. But, she can be the beginning of change. As an official interpreter, she would have the authority to ensure that any agreements made are honored. She would be your voice in the white man's councils. The discussion continued for hours, with warriors raising concerns about trusting the government, about the practical details of the proposed arrangement, about what would happen if the peace agreement failed. Throughout it all, Mitchell answered their questions with a patience and respect that gradually earned their grudging trust. Finally, Nana raised the crucial question that had been underlying all the others. If we agree to this peace, what happens to our way of life? Must we become like white men to live safely? The governor's proposal specifically protects your traditional ways, Mitchell explained. You would remain on lands designated for your tribe. You would govern yourselves according to Apache law. The only requirement is an end to raiding and warfare. And, our children, asked another warrior. What of their future? They would learn both Apache and white ways, preparing them for a world where both will be necessary. Mrs. McKenna has already begun teaching some of your women to read and write English. That knowledge could protect your people in negotiations with white officials. As dawn approached, the warriors prepared for their final decision. One by one, they spoke their positions. Some remained skeptical, fearing that any deal with the white government would ultimately favor white interests. Others, influenced by what they had seen of Sarah's work in their camp, believed that this might be their best chance for a lasting peace. The vote was closer than Nailnish had expected. 14 warriors in favor, 9 opposed. Not an overwhelming mandate, but enough to accept the government's proposal. As the council fire died to embers, Mitchell prepared to ride back to Captain Reynolds with their answer. But, before he left, old Nana had one final question. This interpreter position, he said, it would make the white woman important to your government. Would she be safe from those who might not approve of her choice? Yes, Mitchell replied firmly. She would have the full protection of territorial law. Anyone who harmed her would face serious consequences. When the warriors dispersed, Nailnish walked slowly back to his wickiup, knowing that everything was about to change. Inside, he found Sarah sitting beside Ayana's sleeping mat, the child's hand clasped in hers. Desba looked up expectantly as he entered. Well, brother, she asked quietly. The warriors have agreed, Nailnish said. If you wish it, Sarah, you can stay as our official interpreter. Sarah's eyes filled with tears of relief and joy. I wish it more than anything, she whispered. But, understand, Nailnish continued seriously, this is not just about you remaining with us. This is about our people choosing peace over war, about building a new kind of relationship with the white government. If this arrangement fails, if the peace breaks down, you could be blamed by both sides. I understand the risks, Sarah said. But, I also understand the possibilities. If we can make this work, Ayana and the other children will grow up in a world where Apache and white people can coexist. Ayana stirred in her sleep, her hand tightening around Sarah's. Even unconscious, the child seemed to sense the importance of what was happening around her. 3 days later, Captain Reynolds arrived at the Apache camp with a small escort and a document that would make Sarah McKenna the first official Apache white interpreter in the territory's history. The signing ceremony was simple but profound, with warriors and cavalry officers standing together in the desert sunlight as two peoples took their first tentative steps toward peace. The months that followed were not easy. There were misunderstandings, cultural conflicts, and moments when the fragile peace seemed ready to shatter. Some white settlers resented the government's decision to negotiate with Apache, while some Apache warriors questioned whether the promises would be kept. But Sarah threw herself into her new role with determination and skill. She translated not just languages but entire worldviews, helping each side understand the other's perspective. She established schools where Apache children learned English alongside traditional knowledge, ensuring they would be prepared for whatever future awaited them. Most importantly, she created a model of what was possible when people chose understanding over hatred. Her marriage to Nailnish 6 months after the peace treaty was signed symbolized the new relationship between their peoples, not a conquest or assimilation, but a genuine partnership based on mutual respect. The wedding ceremony itself was unlike anything the territory had ever seen. Apache traditions were blended with Christian elements that honored Sarah's background, creating something entirely new that belonged to both cultures and neither. Government officials attended alongside Apache elders, children played games that mixed English and Apache words, and, for one perfect day, the vision of peaceful coexistence became reality. Years passed. Ayana grew into a remarkable young woman, fluent in 3 languages and comfortable in both Apache and white society. She became Sarah's assistant in the interpreter's office, helping to train a new generation of cross-cultural mediators. Other Apache bands, seeing the success of the peace agreement, began to negotiate their own treaties with government representatives. The camp where Sarah had first arrived to help a dying child became the site of a permanent settlement, a place where Apache and white families lived side by side, sharing knowledge and resources. The wickiup where she had kept her vigil over Ayana was preserved as a symbol of how one act of compassion could change the course of history. But, perhaps the most remarkable change was in the stories that began to be told around campfires and in frontier towns. Instead of tales of hatred and revenge, people spoke of the Apache warrior who chose to protect his enemy when she showed mercy to his child. They told of the white widow who risked everything to save the daughter of those who had killed her husband. They passed down the story of how love and courage had built a bridge across a chasm that had seemed unbridgeable. On quiet evenings, when the desert wind carried the scent of sage and the sound of children's laughter, Sarah would sit with Nailnish and watch Ayana play with her younger siblings, children born into a world where their mixed heritage was a source of strength rather than conflict. In those moments, she would remember the desperate woman who had tracked an Apache war party across the desert to save a dying child, and marvel at how far they had all come. The path they had chosen was not perfect. There were still those on both sides who preferred the old ways of hatred and suspicion. Political changes in Washington sometimes threatened their carefully constructed peace. Economic pressures and cultural misunderstandings created new challenges with each passing year. But the foundation they had built, rooted in Sarah's initial act of compassion and Nailnish's courage to protect her, proved strong enough to weather these storms. The interpreter's office that Sarah established became a permanent institution, training new generations of mediators who would carry on their work. The schools they founded produced Apache leaders who could navigate both worlds, ensuring their people's survival and prosperity. Most importantly, they had proven that it was possible for ancient enemies to become family, for different cultures to strengthen each other rather than one destroying the other. They had shown that sometimes the greatest victories came not from conquering enemies but from transforming them into friends. As Sarah looked out over the settlement that had grown around their original camp, watching Apache and white children play together while their parents worked side by side, she thought of the long journey that had brought her here. It had begun with a dying child and a desperate hope, continued through impossible choices and dangerous trust, and led to a future none of them could have imagined. The white widow and the Apache warrior had found each other across a divide of hatred and fear. Their love had not erased the differences between their peoples, but it had shown that those differences could be a source of strength rather than division. In saving one child, they had helped save 2 cultures, creating something new and hopeful in the harsh beauty of the desert that had brought them together. In the end, their story became more than just a tale of individual courage and love. It became a legend about the power of compassion to transform the world, proving that sometimes the most unlikely heroes are found not in the warriors who win battles, but in the healers who choose to save lives instead of taking them. The Apache warrior had commanded everyone else to go, but the white widow had refused to leave his ailing daughter. In that refusal lay the seed of a transformation that would echo through generations, a reminder that the choice to show mercy to one's enemies might just be the most courageous act of all.